had a system. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I think when the head coach is basically in charge of the draft, when Bill Belichick was when I was in Cleveland, we basically developed a philosophy of what we were looking for in terms of a player as it relates to the schemes we're going to run offensively and defensively. And Jimmy and a lot of teams in the league developed their own philosophy. Then they drafted that philosophy. So everybody is in under one roof, and they're all on the same page. So there's really no player that doesn't really fit the scheme being drafted.
It seems so logical. You get the personnel guy together with the coaches and you draft a guy that fits the system. Why do so many teams not have that in place, and why do so many scouts sell a guy that may not work in the coach's scheme?
Well, I think the one thing about the National Football League that change is always happening, and when you get a lot of change, people come in with new systems and new ideas, and there's just not one way to win a championship in the National Football League. A lot of teams have done it. The power of Dallas, the speed and the quickness of the 49ers have won championships. So there's a lot of different ways, and so when you make changes, subtle changes within your organization, that affects the overall draft philosophy. Very similar to baseball. The St. Louis Cardinals were a great drafting team. They wanted speed. They wanted to do that. That's how they build their organization, and this is kind of how it's built in football.
You mentioned power. Power the key. You have to have one guy that has the ability to draft players and then dictate scheme. That's why so many top coaches like Jimmy Johnson insist on that when they go into new jobs. It helps your odds of succeeding. Now down to Chris Myers in Dallas.
And the Cowboys are getting ready to welcome their top 2 draft picks, Kavika Pittman and also Randall Godfrey. They are in town, and they'll be welcoming them to the media. They recently made the trade. They didn't have many picks today to deal with, so they traded that 4th-round choice next year to Baltimore for the recent pick, number 157. And the Cowboys drafting an offensive lineman, Kenneth McDaniel, 6'2", over 320 pounds, out of Norfolk State, a small school, someone who could help that depth on the offensive line. As we said yesterday, 3 of the Cowboy offensive linemen average an age of 36, and of course Clay Shiver, the only other offensive lineman that the Cowboys have drafted so far, and they're looking at this as a draft for depth. And something interesting to point out, listening to Jimmy Johnson talk with Chris Mortensen and the players that can be selected in the last round, a recent study was done, and of the top 131 quality Pro Bowl players in the NFL, 43% of those were drafted in the 1st or 2nd round, but 25% of those top 131 players were drafted or signed after the 7th round. So certainly some of those players will contribute and become quality Pro Bowl players. Let's go back now to Mike Tirico in New York.
Yeah, Chris, and now that you have just a 7-round draft, that makes free agency more important. But remember, even though it's 7 rounds, it's still more picks than it was in the past 7 rounds because of expansion teams and compensatory selections that you get for adding or losing free agents. So as Jimmy Johnson tries to build now here in Miami, the question is the league the same as when Jimmy Johnson left it a few years ago?
I think in Dallas, I think he had exactly his type of team. He had some young players. He had a team that had not really won, and they were ready to listen to him and take exactly what he said to heart, and he could basically structure the team the way he wanted to.
It's the fact that Jimmy inherited a mature team that was fighting for a Super Bowl every year. And consequently, it's much more difficult to take that team from the top of the middle, where it is, to the top in this system. I think it's much more difficult to do that than it was in years past.
Well, I joked with him at Indianapolis. He said, Carl, when I left, we didn't have this thing called a cap. And I know right now he's felt like he's been stuck because he hasn't been able to move, and he's lost a couple of good players because of their cap situation.
Well, I really don't know that there are major differences when you evaluate talent, whether it be free agents or players coming into the draft. You still have to evaluate players. You still have to win with talent. And then once you get the talent to the franchise, they have to play at a maximum level, and so you still have to coach them, you still have to motivate them. So I don't know that there are drastic differences now than what it was a few years ago.
Sterling, you felt the effects of the change in the system from before Jimmy, when he was in Dallas, to now as he comes back to Miami. How do you feel the change in system will impact Jimmy's philosophy?
I think the only change is basically the salary cap, and like Carl Peterson said, he's not going to have the opportunities to do things and move up and get great players. But it's like Jimmy said, when you look at a guy, if you like him and you get an opportunity to take him, you take him. And you get guys that are self-motivated. Jimmy motivates those ones that are already in your system at Miami, the players that are already there. He'll motivate those players to play better, but the guys that he just drafted, they're going to come in and play great for him.
He's a very smart man, and he found a way to be successful, from XO systems to the way he motivated players to the way things worked with Jerry. And this is almost another hurdle, but when you have somebody who can maneuver around everything, you get the feeling he'll find a way to get it done under this system. As we continue with the National Football League Draft Day 2, you see the Dallas most recent selection, and San Francisco weighing in with Iani Uezoke, the wide receiver from Cal. He goes from Berkeley but stays right in the Bay Area, going to the 49ers.
All right, son, let's see it.
You guys cops?
Poultry police. We got reports this here Long John's, a fish place, is serving tender, all white, batter-tipped chicken fillets. It's a unique taste for a paltry sum.
59 cents each.
59 cents. Nobody prices poultry at that price, pal.
Long John Silver's does.
It's the 59-cent chicken sale at Long John Silver's.
Just put it in the bag. Evidence?
Lunch.
This is more like it. Soon I'll be far away from anyone who's ever even heard of 10 cents a minute from Sprint.
10 cents a minute?
1 10 dime.
A dime a minute is a wonderful deal. And it's good forever.
It's as simple as that. Simple as that. Simple as that. To think. After all my work, I'll be remembered as the dime lady. But I'm not going to think about that. That's why I'm taking this little trip to Hawaii.
Call now to get 10 cents a minute across the U.S. and now even to Canada.
I think it's probably personality that distinguishes Sports Center. A lot of people don't realize that we write virtually all our own stuff.
Chucky Carr is into leather. Ooh, racy. To all the young players.
They're not going to they're not.
Somebody's a writer.
Get him. They're not going to get him.
Jack, which sounds better? Good or good?
The second one?
Yeah, good, thanks.
All bands play on here in New York at the corner of 31st and 8th. In Midtown Manhattan, the theater at Madison Square Garden, the draft Dodgers entertaining outside as we continue inside with day 2 of the draft here on The Deuce. We have 90 more picks to make in this NFL draft. We are at pick 164. Earlier, we were talking about the Baltimore situation and the getting adjusted to life as the Baltimore Ravens. Art Modell, the owner, is now joining our Sal Palantonio, and here's Sal.
Hi, Michael. Take a look at this team generic headquarters. These white helmets are what the Baltimore Ravens will be wearing come minicamp next week. You can't really see, there's no logo on there right now. That's what they'll be wearing. And right now, Art Modell joins me. Art, tell us what you're going to do to market this team, when you'll have a logo in place and all that.
That helmet was borrowed from Penn State. We will have our colors and our uniform designs hopefully around June 7th. Marketing will start within a week or 10 days. Pricing out our product, going out in the marketplace, and we're very excited. I think the reception we have received from Baltimore and the surrounding communities has been extraordinary, and we're grateful for that. And now it's our job to deliver a good product, a winning product, something that Baltimore will be proud of.
One of the big misconceptions about your move is that you guys are now rolling in cash, but nothing could be further from the truth. I understand you're facing $125 million in relocation expenses. How do you plan to make that up?
By ESPN standards, as a weekend, petty cash. No, we'll make it up. We made a move. It was costly to move. We haven't had income since last November, understandably, and all teams use advanced ticket sales at this time of year as operating for operating purposes. We don't have that benefit, but we're not worried. We're in good shape. This is a solid franchise, and happy to be here.
Describe yesterday in the war room, or even before, the debate that went on in your organization about whether Lawrence Phillips was the right person to take for this organization at this time.
Sal, there was no debate whatsoever involving the choice of Ogden in the 4th slot. That was preordained 2 days ago when we matched up a series of pairings, Johnson and Phillips, Hardy and Phillips, so forth and so on, to see if the combination came up at the end of the end of 4th shot, who would we take? And I asked Ozzie Newsome. He said, we'd like to take Ogden. I said, are you making that purely on a competitive judgment? An athletic judgment is so fine, but if you're worried about the outside problems, then I may want to rethink our position. He said, absolutely, on a competitive basis, he's the best football player on the board right now.
But you'd have to agree that Ogden will be an easier sell for you at this time as you're trying to define your organization in this community.
Well, Sal, I've been around this business a long, long time. We've had a lot of problems over the years, and somehow, some way, my organization